Hi,
Hi, Jen.
how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. Did you
Been-
receive the email?
Which email?
Alicia just sent an email.
I could not make any sense of that email.
I
I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm not going to review anything. You can just all.
I feel like, so if she's not resending the materials, I feel like some materials is missing. So
It was. I mean, I happen to have what Dominic has pulled together for this next meeting.
okay.
So there is better documentation. But, you know, frankly, I think people should be allowed to read through this on their own and not just see it in the meeting.
Oh, so we are not supposed to read that ourselves. We can only.
I'm gonna ask why we can't send it to all the members of exec.
I see.
And then she says, we have to answer Mei Li's question. Well, what the fuck was Mei Li's question? I don't remember.
I just searched my box. I couldn't find any Maylee's question. I'm gonna like look deeper.
Well, she didn't repeat it. She didn't say what it was. Like, we should just remember a month ago, Mei Li asked a question.
I am going to look into what question Maylee asked. I really don't know. I really don't recall. I have no idea what she's talking about. But
I don't know. You know, she's not doing any better. I had a little exchange with Dominic. I said, Dominic, you're going to be at the meeting, and he is. And I said that really we suffered from a lack of a strong chair last time. And I hope you can kind of coach Alicia so she knows what to do, because she clearly didn't.
And what did Dominic say?
He said he has been having conversations with her.
And what does Dominic want? I mean, I guess I don't want, I mean, I understand Dominic is already very busy. I don't know if I want to burden him with another call. I just feel like I want to know what he genuinely feeling that this should be heading. Like you said, we respect his opinion, right? So and also his leadership. So I want to know, like, what does he really think it should be?
Yeah, he's not saying what he thinks the outcome should be.
Okay. Or what we should do, like, are we taking a vote on whether recommending recommending Michael to leave or to stay? Is that what we should be voting on? If like exactly if somebody motioned that, is that something we should be doing?
I do not know.
Right? I mean, I guess that's all the question in your mind too.
I mean, I'm going to look at the documents, because remember last time I didn't even have all the documents. So this time I have them all.
Well, you have them all, but we don't have them.
You don't have them.
Right.
No.
So,
I don't know why that cannot be the case.
yeah.
But we'll see what happens with my question. I don't remember Mei Li asking the question. And much less what the question was.
Think about it. We have to read line by line to understand like these kind of things, right? Like which specific part is more important than the others. And then if you are just like reading from screen, to be honest, at the land use meeting, sometimes I cannot even see the things on the screen. So how can I see like
well,
sometimes
these are whole documents, they're many page documents. They're not just little short, you know, one screen things.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's right to have to read them at the meeting and not read them beforehand.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about, was this such a crime that Michael deserves to be punished by being thrown off the board?
Right.
Or was it, you know, a mistake? He shouldn't have done it. He apologized. He can apologize again.
And not doing that again. I agree with you. That is exactly the point I have. Like, I feel like, I mean, maybe that ship has already sailed and nothing is really salvageable right now. Right. But I just really feel like the whole thing is not such a big fucking deal. It's just about people's like.
It's a big deal to Susan. She feels she's, you know, he just shouldn't have done it. That's for sure.
Right.
And he should have known better. He's a big boy.
Right.
And he was so pissed off that he just, you know, starts mouthing off. I mean, I'd love to be able to talk to him, but I don't think I should.
No, you should.
We're the jury, you know.
No, you should not. You should not talking to him right now.
No, I'm not gonna, no, I'm not gonna.
When I talk to members, other members, I tend to be very careful about this issue. Not to lead anything, not to express my
No.
opinion.
Exactly. We don't have an opinion. We haven't heard the facts yet.
Right. I don't even have the materials, like documents. So. And you have it only because you are the Zoom
Because I'm
facilitator.
the Zoom facilitator. I couldn't do it before because we didn't have all the documents.
Yeah.
Yeah, is right. Thanks, Trevor.
Trevor, show your face, Trevor. I'm really happy to see you as a third person.
See a real person behind the photo. Hear the voice.
Can you hear us?
That is me. I'm just not moving.
And admit the people.
Yes. Hi, Herman. Yeah, let me see. It's 6:33. Why don't we give 2 more minutes?
Okay, but the recording is on, so
Okay, all right.
exercise care.
I see all the usual suspects.
Hi, Matthew. I'm trying to spot people.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Of course.
And Anthony, where's Anthony? Oh, Anthony's right here. Hi, Anthony.
Yep. How you doing, Jackie?
Very good. And also, let's see. Is Scott joining us today?
He may be on a little bit later, but we can get started without him whenever you're all ready.
Okay, all right. Hi, Dominic.
Hi there.
So I'm gonna give it 1 more minute at 6:35. And Linda, you are recording, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's, yep, so it's 6:35, so I'm gonna start the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CB Free Land Use Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. We are conducting the meeting through Zoom tonight, and my vice chair, Linda, is managing the platform, and she's gonna give a brief introduction about the Zoom functions and some guidelines. Linda?
Okay, we're all pretty au courant with Zoom nowadays, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but a couple of things. If you wish to speak, whether you're on the committee or not on the committee, raise your hand. If you have a current version of Zoom, you will find down at the bottom, either you'll see raise hand or you'll see reactions, and raise hand is under that. If you have an older version of Zoom, it may still be at the bottom of the participant list. The second thing is, if you're not a member of the committee, please put your name and affiliation in the chat so that we have a record of who was here. And that's, I think, it.
Thank you, Linda. I just want to emphasize to everyone that whoever wants to speak should raise their hands first and get recognized by the chairperson. This is to maintain the order of the meeting so we can move it better. So next, I would like to let you know that Michael Perlis, Mr. Michael Perlis has informed me last month that he would like to step down as the secretary of this committee because of his own busy schedule. And I just want to say I really appreciate for all his help in the last 2 years, almost 2 years. So thank you, Michael. before we have a new secretary, Linda and I will work together on taking meeting notes and preparing for the minutes. And Michael, do you have anything to say to the committee?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone, especially Linda and Jackie, who have been very helpful with editing my sometimes rough minutes. Yeah, I just really appreciate you guys taking me under my wing and everyone being so understanding, during our transition to Zoom. And I'm happy to help, the next person who would like to be secretary, train on the minutes. Yeah, thanks everyone. It was a great and definitely informative 2 years. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
And
So
I'd like to issue a second reminder to those who've just zoomed in. Please put your name and affiliation in the chat. Thank you.
thank you, both Mike and Linda. So next, I would like to. I think I have to take a roll calling to take the attendance. Let me see. Let me pull up that file. Jackie Wong, yes. Linda Jones,
Yes,
Michael Perlis,
Present. Jackie, I can still, I'm doing the minutes this month, so I'm happy to do attendance. if
Oh.
you'd like.
you are? Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I thought you are not doing that this month. Okay,
No,
that's.
I'm happy to do the minutes this month.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so yes, you do it then. You do the roll
Okay,
call.
I'll take over from Michael. Dominic Berg,
Yes.
thank you. Jonathan Chu. I don't see him, okay. Herman Hewitt,
Yes.
thank you, Herman. Trevor Holland,
Yes.
thank you. Lisa Kaplan,
Here.
thank you. Olympia Kazi,
Here.
thank you, Olympia. Damaris Reyes,
I'm here.
thank you. Troy Velez,
not here.
don't see you. Steve Herrick,
Nope,
and Tim Laughlin.
nope.
Thank you, Michael. So tonight, our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for our March meeting. And let me know if any one of you have problem with it or we just approve it. Okay, I see no questions, so the minute is approved. Next item is the DCP presentation on the zoning for accessibility. So this is about the zoning incentive for private developments to provide or improve MTA subway accessibilities. And we have Matthew and Scott, I think, from DCP tonight to give the presentation. And if you had a chance to read the plan before the meeting, it has a lot of details, especially on the reliefs. And I'm talking to committee members. If you have questions, please try to save them until the speakers finish their presentation, and we'll ask all the questions together. So tonight, our goal is to understand the plan and the text amendments as much as we can, and we will discuss the plan and vote on a result in May. So Matthew, I think Linda may have to make you co-host.
Is this for sharing screens?
Yep.
I believe Tony Lechuga or Anthony Lechuga is going to be sharing his screen. So if you can give him permission. And while you're doing that, so it's a larger team that we have here tonight. It's between DCP and the MTA. So because I'm sure you're aware, there's going to be a few different text amendments that are going to be coming to the community boards related to a suite of pandemic recovery text amendments, pretty much. So this is the first of a few. So we'll be seeing each other quite a bit in the next couple months. And so for each of the, just kind of a little bit of housekeeping for each of the text amendments that the city's putting forward, we have different project managers that are working on them. I'll always be here because I'm the liaison for 3. But tonight we're actually having Tony Lechuga, who is our project manager for Manhattan, and he'll be presenting along with Marcus Book, who is the Assistant Director of Government and Community Relations at the MTA. We're also joined by Chris Lee, who's in our zoning division. He's kind of knows the ins and outs of everything about this text. And then we're also joined by Monsoon Park, who's the senior real estate manager for transit-oriented development. And so we're just going to go through the presentation first, and then as questions arise, we're kind of just going to kick those around to the appropriate staff to answer them. But with that, I'll pass it over to Tony.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to make sure that people can actually see the presentation. Is that correct? Okay, great. So one second. All right, so I'm actually going to we're going to start with the MTA. So I'm actually going to ask Marcus to go ahead and kick us off.
So good evening, everyone. Good evening, Community Board 3's Land Use Committee. My name is Marcus Book. I'm with New York City Transit Government Community Relations. So let me begin by saying that in 2019, the New York City Council Land Use Division published a Let's Go report entitled Zoning for Transit Accessibility that proposed strengthening existing zoning tools to accelerate the implementation of needed ADA access throughout the city. Today, the MTA and the Department of City Planning are proposing a citywide zoning text amendment that builds on those ideas, on the ideas laid out by the council report. Elevate transit, that's an important term. Elevate transit, zoning for accessibility, or ZFA, is a citywide zoning text amendment that proposes to expand 2 specific zoning tools to better coordinate private development and station improvements. First, the first aspect of this would be a transit easement requirement that would apply system-wide, and second, a new transit improvement bonus program that would apply in the highest density areas of the city. We can go to the next slide. So MTA New York City transit system is over 100 years old. Most of our stations were constructed before 1950. As a result, less than 30% of subway and Staten Island Railway stations are currently accessible. The MTA system also includes Long Island Railroad and Metro North. And while 65% of these commuter rail stations are accessible, the greater interval between commuter rail stations magnifies the impact each accessible station has on our riders. Next. So increasing accessibility is a key step in modernizing the city's transit system, as the lack of elevator access in stations affects many New Yorkers who have had a hard time navigating subway station stairs. These riders include people with physical disabilities, seniors, parents with young children, people with temporary injuries, and even just people who are transporting heavy objects. In order to navigate the system, these customers rely on accessible stations, which may not be close to their origin or destination point. The result is a subway ride that should take minutes can take hours. For these transit riders, more elevators throughout the system would allow for shorter, more direct trips. Next. So, and this segment, this important segment of our population is not insignificant. Of the 8.4 million residents in New York City, over 500,000 have an ambulatory disability. We have 500,000 children under 5, and more than 14% of the population is over 65. Moreover, the number of seniors in New York is growing at more than twice the rate of the total population. Making the system accessible for all customers is an urgent priority for the MTA. To address these deficiencies in our current transit system, MTA prioritizes accessibility improvements and other station improvements in their capital programs. The 20 to 2024 capital program, 2020 to 2024 capital program dedicates over $5 billion to making 77 subway, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad stations accessible. Additionally, one goal of the capital program is to ensure that no subway rider is more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. The current capital program targets stations in all 5 boroughs in order to ensure that this goal is met. And in spite of the ongoing pandemic, the MTA is acting on these goals. In the last year, the MTA opened 11 new ADA stations and awarded more than a dozen new ADA station projects. Okay, but progress can be slow because elevator construction in subway stations is particularly challenging for many reasons. As I mentioned before, stations are very old and can have complex infrastructure, which make installing an elevator expensive or impossible. Within stations, platforms can be narrow, limiting the locations where an elevator can be placed. At sidewalk level, existing buildings near stations can prevent elevators from being built in the optimal place, and sidewalks themselves can be too narrow to allow for distance, to allow for clearance for an elevator. Additionally, subsurface conditions present decades worth of highly complex utility infrastructure, including sewers, water pipes, and electrical cables. Because of these unique challenges, often the preferable and only solution is to place the elevator and corresponding circulation elements within private property. This is not unprecedented, as there are already dozens of station stairs and elevators integrated within private properties throughout the city. So now I'm going to pass the presentation to Tony, who will continue the remainder of the proposal. Tony?
Thanks, Marcus. So currently there are zoning tools in place today that help us alleviate some of the burdens that Marcus just talked about and help us support construction of transit improvements. Specifically, there are 2 transit-related zoning provisions in place today, and these 2 mechanisms are what ZFA seeks to expand. The first is transit easement requirements, and the second is station improvement bonuses. And we're going to go through what both of those are and how they'll expand under this proposal. So these tools leverage station access improvements in places where investment is already occurring. They ensure that opportunities for coordinating developments and station improvements are evaluated and realized. As a result, we get better designed stations inside and we get a better sidewalk environment outside because station entrances are being located off of our sidewalks. Moreover, these zoning provisions help to speed up delivery of transit improvements. However, the current provisions have certain limitations that ZFA is aiming to address. So first, let's look at the current easement provisions. So they address the challenges of locating new station entrances and other transit amenities. An easement is a legal right to use another's land for specific limited purpose. In other words, it's a small permanent space reserved in a building for the transit agency to use in the future. Transit easements have traditionally been used to provide space for new station entrances, passageways, or even ancillary facilities that support subway lines, things like emergency egress or ventilation structures. However, in today's zoning resolution, these provisions have very limited coverage and only apply in a few areas in the city, such as along the 2nd Avenue subway. The zoning resolution also does not currently provide a consistent citywide approach for facilitating transit easements on development sites around transit stations. As a result of these limitations, there have been missed opportunities for the MTA to locate ADA access at optimal locations on development sites next to the station. The photograph right here shows an example of that in Brooklyn. Second thing that ZFA proposes to expand upon relates to transit bonuses. So the zoning resolution contains transit bonus mechanisms to support the creation of transit improvements. In the densest commercial districts of the city, we've incentivized developers to both provide the space and to construct station improvements, including ADA access, through floor area bonuses that provide additional development rights. As with easement provisions, though, transit bonus mechanisms are limited to a handful of areas or in or near central business districts. And within that limited geography, only sites next to subway stations can take advantage of the standard subway improvement bonus. The current process associated with obtaining this bonus involves considerable public review, which adds a lot of time and risk to development schedules. All of those factors have limited the number of subway bonus applications that we've seen to date. And this brings us to ZFA. So to address the limitations of those zoning provisions that exist, we're proposing zoning for accessibility. This proposal seeks to create more opportunities for accessibility throughout the transit system through expanding these zoning tools that are already available to us. So the goals of the proposal. ZFA proposes to expand the easement requirement system to most station adjacent sites and provide zoning flexibility on sites where easements are provided to offset potential burdens on development feasibility. That's the first part. The second part is to increase participation in the transit bonus program by increasing its area of applicability to other high density areas of the city. And we're going to go through both of those parts now. So the first component of the proposal is a system-wide easement requirement that would assist the MTA and other transit agencies with identifying opportunities for locating future station access points and other station facilities. As part of this requirement, all developments and enlargements on zoning lots within 50 feet of mass transit stations and in applicable zoning districts would need to file an application with the MTA and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission to determine whether an easement on their zoning lot is needed to help facilitate station access improvements in the future. While the process of obtaining a certification would be required for most sites within 50 feet of a transit station, we anticipate that the MTA will only ask for an easement in limited places that are the most optimal for future transit access around each station. Oops. Sorry. This illustrative map shows ZFA applicability within Community District 3. The red line shows the boundary of Community District 3. For the purposes of understanding the implications of the easement requirement for CD3, every station except the First Avenue station has some area of applicability for the easement. The dark green areas on the map show zoning lots that are within 50 feet of eligible stations where an easement may be required for all developments or enlargements. The green dots, which in CD3 only include the East Broadway station, show where only the proposed easement requirement would be in place. The blue dots show stations where both of the ZFA proposals, the proposed easement and the bonus, would be applicable. And we'll come back to the bonus later with another map. Only the lots shown in orange that are both in higher density districts and within 500 feet of an eligible station would be eligible for the bonus provision. But as I said, we'll come back to that later. So if it is determined that a transit easement is needed on a zoning lot, an easement volume would be reserved for station access improvements and other station facilities. Knockout panels would be provided where needed for below or above grade access to the easement, and temporary construction access would be granted when the transit agency is ready to construct improvements within the easement volume. While the owner could elect to build such improvements within the designated easement volume at the time that they're developing, construction of those improvements would not be a requirement. The transit agency, in consultation with the developer and the chairperson of the City Planning Commission, would determine the necessary easement for future station upgrades. Depending on the needs of each individual station, transit easements could vary in shape and size. So the vertical volume of an easement could occupy several floors depending on the elevation of the station. Underground subway stations could occupy multiple levels below grade, whereas elevated transit stations could take up a number of floors above grade. The horizontal footprint of an easement could also vary depending on the type of access that's needed. For example, an elevator could take up less space, whereas a new station entrance that requires a staircase, elevator, and turnstiles could require a larger easement volume. There are also different types of easements, depending on whether it is intended to provide a future station access point, or in other instances, substations, which typically warrant larger volumes in the cellar level of a development site. So potential issues with development sites. Because of this variation in easement shape and size, easement areas can affect development sites in a number of ways. The easement itself can take up floor space on a site and can reduce available floor area for the development itself. The shape and size of an easement can also occupy a large amount of space within a development's building envelope. This not only affects the direct area that is occupied by the easement, but also has implications for construction feasibility around such an area. Easements can also restrict available space to provide ground floor uses, and depending on the type of development, may create compatibility issues with more sensitive uses such as apartments units and other residential uses. Without any zoning relief, easements can limit construction of a development to its full potential, and in certain situations can result in buildings that lack any relationship with the future use of the easement. If the provision of an easement makes it challenging for a development to be built, it would be much more difficult for the transit agency to acquire such an easement. Therefore, in order to facilitate easement agreements in the future, this proposal has targeted relief from certain zoning limits that would be provided to minimize potential challenges for construction on a site subject to the proposed requirement. So there are 5 general categories of provisions being proposed, and those include floor area and open space, height and setbacks, parking relief, use allowances, and streetscape provisions. And I'll go over the 4 of those provisions that would actually apply in CD3. So the set of proposed floor area and open space relief is intended to allow developments to be constructed without losing their permitted buildable floor area due to an easement, and to provide greater flexibility for locating easements and station connections in the future. Floor space contained within any easement volume would be excluded from the definition of that site's zoning floor area. Transit easements would also be treated as permittable obstructions to provide flexibility for designating easement areas at an optimal location on each site. Lot coverage, which regulates the amount of open space needed on a site, would also be increased in certain districts to allow easements to be integrated more easily within the building. The proposed height modifications would provide targeted building envelope flexibility in districts that are governed by maximum building height limits to facilitate the provision of easements and permitted floor area on such development sites. So to accommodate developable floor space elsewhere around the easement volume, sites that provide an easement would be able to increase their maximum height by 10 feet. As above grade easement volumes can affect multiple stories on a development site, additional height is warranted in higher density districts that need greater flexibility to accommodate available floor area on their site. So in R7 districts and above, maximum heights would be increased by 20 feet for developments that provide an above grade easement. In addition, street wall flexibility would also be provided within 15 feet of an easement area to provide greater flexibility in articulating street walls around the easement volumes. Use allowances are also proposed to activate spaces around future station entrances that will enhance the surrounding environment. So in some instances, an easement may not be improved immediately with a new station entrance, and such easement volume could be left vacant for some time. To activate these vacant spaces, transit easements could be temporarily occupied by any permitted non-residential uses until such a volume is needed by the transit agency. In residence districts, local retail uses would also be permitted as a temporary use. to promote complementary uses around easement areas and enhance sidewalk environments where future station entrances might be located. Local retail uses would be permitted within 30 feet around an easement in residence districts and within 30 feet on the second floor where an above grade easement is provided. Similarly, permitted commercial uses would be allowed on the second floor where above grade easements are provided on sites with mixed use buildings in commercial districts. To allow commercial space to be accommodated more easily on sites with an above grade easement, such uses on the second floor would be allowed up to 30 feet in height within the rear yard. Modifications to streetscape requirements would also be provided to ensure that rules pertaining to the ground floor or other elements affecting street design do not conflict with station design requirements. So easement areas would therefore be excluded from general streetscape provisions, which include ground floor use regulations, transparency provisions, and planting requirements applicable in lower density districts or pursuant to quality housing requirements. The proposed streetscape provisions would also ensure that developments are built appropriately around easement areas and future station entrances. So to ensure safety of transit users entering and leaving station entrances within designated easement areas, curb cuts would be restricted within 30 feet of an easement. So in addition to the proposed regulations, additional relief may be needed to address unique site conditions that may create challenges for providing an easement. So in these unique situations, certain developers may want to provide complementary circulation space around the easement in the form of additional open space. That may warrant further modifications. To allow for additional flexibility, further use, bulk parking, loading, and streetscape modifications would be available pursuant to discretionary review and approval. Depending on the amount of relief that is requested, modifications would either be subject to an authorization that would allow a height increase of up to 25% or through a special permit if more height relief is needed. While the easement requirement only applies to developments and enlargements on sites with a lot area of at least 5,000 square feet in applicable zoning districts, easements may also be provided voluntarily on other sites. For such sites in the same applicable zoning districts where an easement is provided, zoning relief would apply. Specifically, on small sites with a lot area of less than 5,000 square feet, the same set of relief applicable to required sites would apply to developments and enlargements providing an easement. On sites with an existing building that is being converted, targeted relief would be provided to facilitate the provision of an easement within an existing building. In other instances, instead of a transit easement, the transit agency may need additional sidewalk space or clear path around an existing or future station entrance. Where a clear path is provided, street wall flexibility would apply to allow street walls to be located beyond the permitted distance from the street line or the street walls of adjacent buildings. And that's the first part of ZFA, all about the new easement requirements. The second part of the proposal is an expanded transit bonus program that would be optional for sites that are proximate to mass transit stations. So as mentioned earlier, today's subway bonus mechanism grants a floor area bonus of up to 20% for a significant station improvement. The current bonus, however, only applies to station adjacent sites that are in the highest density commercial districts in the city. Because of the limited applicability of this program, the lengthy application and review process, only a handful of station improvements have been provided through this tool up to date. So, to address the limitations of today's subway bonus mechanism, the proposed transit bonus program would have two parts. One, continue to grant a floor area bonus of up to 20% of the maximum floor area ratio for developments and enlargements that construct station improvements. And expand the geography of areas where that transit bonus can be used. Such a floor area bonus would be subject to a simplified discretionary review and approval process in the form of an authorization by the City Planning Commission. So, in order for bonus floor area to be granted under this provision, the owner of the development site must construct a significant station improvement. Such improvements may vary and include a single or a variety of station upgrades. Where stations are inaccessible, ADA upgrades would be prioritized, meaning those would have to be the first thing a developer did. Examples include the construction of a single elevator, additional station entrances, mezzanine expansion, and platform upgrades, as well as additional signage and lighting. The amount of floor area bonus that a developer would get is contingent on the degree to which such improvements enhance access and station environments. The proportionality between the amount of additional floor area that would be granted and station improvements provided varies depending on the individual station needs and unique conditions. The floor area generated from the bonus would not be occupied, may only be occupied once the MTA determines that such improvements are in fact usable by the public. So back to the map again. So this is, again, an illustrative map showing the expansion of the bonus provision applicability in Community District 3. So those blue dots show the current applicability, which includes none of the stations in Community District 3, but a few that are nearby. The pink dots show the stations where the proposed transit bonus would now be applicable. The orange color shows the area that is within 500 feet of the station footprint that also meets the high density zoning district requirements. So the new bonus program would expand the applicability of the existing subway bonus program to other high density areas and key business districts. The proposed bonus would expand the geography, including all 9 and R10 districts in the city, their commercial equivalent, and M16 districts. The new transit bonus would allow sites that are within 500 feet of a station to participate in the program in exchange for an off-site improvement that would be constructed at a station that is not immediately adjacent to the site. This feature of the new bonus program to allow both on-site and off-site improvements would incentivize a greater number of developments to provide these station improvements. So for developments and enlargements providing a transit improvement, modifications to other zoning provisions would be available pursuant to additional discretionary review and approval. So depending on the amount of relief that is necessary, modifications may either be subject to an authorization that would allow a height increase of up to 25%, or through a special permit if further height relief is needed. Other relief that would be made available through discretionary review and approval, including modifications to the use, parking, loading, and the streetscape. So modifications pursuant to the authorization or special permit would be subject to specific findings. In summary, the greater coverage of the expanded transit program, as well as the simplified application process for most sites seeking a bonus, would result in additional transit improvements and upgrades for ADA specific access. So, in summary, zoning for accessibility proposes 2 things. 1, a zoning text amendment to establish a framework for coordinating the siting and provision of transit easements with new developments on adjacent sites. Where easements are needed, targeted relief from certain zoning limits would be provided to those developments and enlargements in order to minimize the potential challenges for construction on a site subject to the proposed requirements. As part of that, for sites below 5,000 square feet or where conversions are proposed, the requirement would not apply. The provision of easements is voluntary on those particular sites, and where provided, they would also receive zoning relief. In addition to the proposed set of relief, further use, bulk, parking, loading, and streetscape modifications would be available pursuant to discretionary review and approval. The second part is a text amendment that would expand the transit bonus mechanism that would continue to grant a floor area bonus of up to 20% of the maximum floor area ratio for developments and enlargements that construct station improvements. And second, expand the geography of areas where that transit bonus can be used. For such sites, a transit improvement, for such sites providing a transit improvement, modifications to other zoning provisions would be available pursuant to even further discretionary review and approval. So where are we in this process? So as mentioned at the beginning, we're currently in the public review process of this text amendment. We're asking for your recommendations for the City Planning Commission about this proposal. Official recommendations from all 59 community boards, and borough presidents are requested by June 14th, 2021. So thank you for giving us the time, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have now.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much. Committee members, we are open up for questions. Lisa?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions if I could. First of all, maybe I'm being dense here, so maybe you can walk me through this a little bit. The bonus provision part of this applies to high density areas that are residential 9 or 10 zone, R9 or R10 zones, correct? Or the commercial equivalent?
Yes, and M16 districts.
And M16. In our neighborhood, my understanding is, I didn't look up every single station, but for instance, I looked at the one across from my house, which is the 2nd Avenue F train stop. It's a C6, well, it's an R8 with a C and C62 over lay. So I thought the dividing line or the eligibility was a R9 or 10. So why is that one? And I think that also applies to Delancey Street. Why do they qualify?
That's a question that I might turn over to Chris Lee from our zoning division.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Lee from the zoning division. Thank you for your question. If you look specifically into the zoning districts where the bonus would apply, you will see that the applicability will cover C63A in your community district, as well as the, I believe, close to Delancey R91 district. Anything below R9 would not be applicable for the bonus.
Could you check the 2nd Avenue stop? Where isn't that? I believe that's R8. And
right. Sorry, which station are you referring to?
2nd Avenue, the F train at Houston and 2nd Avenue.
Houston and 2nd Avenue.
And maybe Tony, if you could pull up the map.
Yeah.
So you'll see the orange area around Bowery and Grand Street Station. That is a C63A district, which is an R9 equivalent, R9A equivalent.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about to the east of that at 2nd Avenue.
To the east of that, close to Delancey and F.
Oh, no, at Houston, the second, where it says 2nd Avenue. There's no orange.
Right, because the districts around there are below R9.
So Lisa, the station, the way this map is shown, I think maybe could be a little clearer, but the pink is saying that these are a transit bonus station, but that doesn't always mean that there's going to be applicable sites around it. So we're saying that this is one of the stations that have been identified, but the
Right.
zoning districts around it currently don't allow for a bonus to be used. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
If I could chime in, I think that there might be a site within 500 feet.
That's right.
And there's
Yeah.
that little sliver to the way to the south along Second Avenue. And I think that's why that station all of a sudden becomes a bonus station, because it captured an eligible zoning district within 500 feet of the station.
That's exactly it. So it's not that every site around the stations in pink is eligible. It's that station is a proposed additional transit bonus station if there is some R9 or R10 or commercial equivalent district within 500 feet of it, and then those buildings within it could apply for this transit bonus to provide that improvement to that station.
So only if it were in that orange area or anywhere around that station?
Only within the orange areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's the same at Delancey and Essex. The eligibility has to do with that little orange square down, which is, I guess, Seward Park.
Yeah. So the orange boxes are the areas that meet the required zoning district requirements and are within 500 feet of a transit station. Yes.
And this obviously doesn't include the proposed Second Avenue subway when and if it ever comes down as far as us. That would be over and above. Correct?
Yeah, the Second Avenue subway already has transit easement certifications embedded in the zoning resolution as a tool that exists already.
Even for the so far unfunded sections?
Yes.
I see.
And Lisa, we had do you remember 14 Second Avenue? It was referred to the board as a easement volume. There's a building going in there. I think it was about 2 years ago.
Yes.
And so that was the same type
around
of
the corner for me, yes.
Yeah, so that's the easement certification. That's kind of it was
okay.
somewhat of the basis for the easement volumes that you're seeing now.
Yeah.
We go to thank you, Lisa.
I have more questions. Should I wait until other people have had a chance?
I think that would be appreciated. Let's give other people a chance to ask first. Trevor?
And Lisa asked the one question I was asking in terms of the location of the station and what zoning areas that you're looking at. So 500 feet within a particular station. So that answers that question. And this is more for the MTA. I'm going to focus on East Broadway. I know there were some work improvements or some station improvements done there, but it did not trigger the need for ADA. I don't know if the MTA is going below the scope, so they don't have to build elevators. So my question is, what triggers, what type of renovation triggers a full ADA accessibility or partial ADA accessibility? And does any of these, or do any of these zoning texts affect that?
Marcus, would you like me to answer that question?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Well, as far as the East Broadway station, and I apologize, you may have to, there are a few questions in your questions. I want to make sure I answer all the different parts of your question. So what, I'll just go to the last part was what would trigger is any improvement to the station that affects access would trigger an ADA requirement. So for East Broadway,
East Broadway was a tunnel, a sandy tunnel improvement project.
I'm not an accessibility expert, but I don't think because that was related to the station itself, that would have triggered an accessibility requirement.
Well, the work wasn't just within the tunnel, obviously. There was some platform work done, and there was some tile work done, and some staircase work done. So I guess I'm asking, what is the trigger for that? And relating to what we're talking about, how does this fall into the ZFA or these proposed text amendments?
So I don't know about the easement requirement because this is not the easement map. Tony, I don't know if you can pull up the easement map.
Yep.
So it looks like, so you can see that there are some green areas. That is the easement applicability. So, so there are, properties adjacent to that station that would be required to come to the MTA under the easement requirement. I do want to add that the East Broadway station is tapped for improvements because of the 2 bridges project. And because
I'm keenly aware of that. Just put it that way. I'm one of the
okay.
litigants in that case. That may or may not happen. But I just don't want us to rely on developers to build subway stations, because if we're a city that's only going to rely on that, we're going to be in some trouble, because we'll never get certain ADA accessibility in poor neighborhoods unless a developer comes in and builds it. But I just really want to focus on that question of what triggers it, and if someone has these easements, would that trigger an elevator or ADA accessibility?
Yeah, I would like to actually circle back with this board, with our system-wide accessibility group, and they're not on this meeting, just to make sure that we do answer that question completely accurately, if you don't mind.
Sure. And make sure that we get an answer for that, Jackie, because I'm very curious about that. And the second question, and now this will be my last, so others can ask, has more to do with the easement requirements. And I'm just a little confused or dense. If their developers are agreeing to easement requirements, but you do not yet have plans, do those spaces just stay empty until the MTA decides to use them? Or what's the plan for these open spaces that are going to be easement, but now they're going to trigger an ADA accessibility? But do you have like you said, temporary retail, which may or may not work in certain areas, or they're just empty spaces?
I can.
Oh, you want to take that, Chris? Go ahead.
Okay. So like what we have along 2nd Avenue within the Special Transit Land Use District, we are allowing for temporary uses within easement volumes. So we're allowing for all permitted uses except for residential use. And where the zoning district is a straight residence district, we are allowing for local retail uses within that space until the MTA is ready to construct a new station entrance within that volume.
Yeah, I think it would be within the developer's best interest to utilize that easement space until such a time until the MTA exercises their claim over it, rather than leaving it vacant.
Yeah, it's just that I imagine that some of these easements are going to be odd spaces, some vertical, which may not actually be conducive to retail, considering what the MTA needs in certain cases. But I'll leave it there for now so that others can ask questions.
And thank you, Trevor. Next, I'm going to go to Mike.
Hi. Yeah, I share similar concerns. I was just doing a quick search of headlines because I know I've seen this headline in the past, and the Transit Center found that privately run subway elevators were out of service 19% of the time during the first 6 months of 2018, whereas MTA operated elevators were out of service just 3.6% of the time. So I'm wondering, this is reported, I think I saw as early as 2011, and this quote I just read from was in 2018. So I'm wondering like what's being done to address that inequity. And also I'm curious how privately owned MTA space is policed differently than publicly owned or MTA owned space. So I guess I'll start with that question.
Yeah, I think that's probably best for the MTA to answer.
Yep. I would be happy to answer that. First, I'll break down the responsibility of maintenance based on this zoning for accessibility. first, if we get an easement under the easement requirement, the MTA would build that elevator. So that responsibility falls to the MTA. So I just wanted to kind of make that distinction. If we get an elevator from a developer because of the zoning bonus, if a developer is not adjacent to the station, because now we've broadened the zone of applicability, if they're within that 500 feet, but they're not adjacent to that station, kind of like in that Second Avenue example that we were talking about, then they would build the elevator, but they wouldn't maintain the elevator because it's not in their building. So we would get, the MTA negotiates a maintenance buyout. The buyout covers annual maintenance as well as a capital replacement, usually around year 17 or so. That's a typical average. Now, if the elevator happens to be within their property because they're adjacent to the station, it's like a street elevator that goes down to the mezzanine, then we have within our development agreements with the transit improvement agreements with the developer, very, very clear requirements that they must meet. One of them is a performance requirement that they meet or exceed New York City Transit elevator performance. Right now, I think it's 96.5%. And there are a number of other requirements. They have to put up letters of credit. They have to put the MTA on the third-party service agreement, elevator service agreement. There are a number of them. So unfortunately, some of the much older developer elevators, they didn't include that. So I'm not quite sure, which ones those elevators are that were mentioned in the report. But certainly today, our standard agreement has these very, very clear requirements that the developer must agree to when they build and they maintain those elevators.
So what happens when they don't meet that requirement?
So if they don't, we have those letters of credit that, so we can go in, it allows us to go in and maintain those elevators, like because we're a party on those maintenance agreements. And so, and then if we have to go in and maintain and go in and do some service, then we have those letters of credit, those bank letters of credit.
Do you know, has that inequity, that number I stated, has that gotten better or worse since 2018?
I can find out. I don't have those numbers.
Okay. I have a few more questions, but other people can ask before we come back.
Thank you, Michael. And actually, I want to piggyback on Michael's question because when I was preparing for tonight, I had the same question. I just want to know, you mentioned that if the developer, the property owners is not maintaining the escalator or elevator, then MTA can go in to do that. But who is going to pay for it? And the cost of this, like the maintenance, is it supposed to be on the property owner? And if you go in, if MTA goes in, does the public pay for it, or do you the property owner?
You're talking about, for example, elevators that are within the building, for example? Right. No, the developer is responsible for paying, not the public.
Okay.
It doesn't come from the public, it comes from the developer. That's part of the agreement. And
are there any accountability, like if the elevator is out of service for us, like certain amount of time, like what does MTA do with that?
Well, there is that letter of credit, and I don't have the full agreement in front of me, but that letter of credit has to remain of a certain amount. So I can look up the terms, but I believe that it has to maintain a certain amount. So if they have to make sure that there's money in that letter of credit for us to draw down on.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can I jump in here too? I'm sorry, it's on the same topic, but I think we're particularly concerned about this because I at least remember, I'm probably not the only one that remembers the ongoing struggle to get the escalator to work at Union Square. And that for years, I think it finally resulted in a lawsuit. And the escalator, just the Beckendorf properties would never repair it. So it's just been a terrible issue in this neighborhood. So we're really gonna want a little bit more information about that. I assume what you're saying is that you would never have an agreement like the one that existed with that building anymore. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. In fact, that is an unfortunate situation, but it's an agreement that obviously we can't change because it's an old agreement. But we've learned from those situations, and I would be happy to, after this meeting, to give you the more specific details of how we can hold these developers to the fire. I just also want to add that the bulk of these improvements that we are certainly hoping to get as a result of zoning for accessibility, because we are expanding the geographic zone of applicability, that not every developer is going to be next to our station, and that's why we want more developers to be eligible, and some of the elevators may actually be inside the station, because we'll need some elevators going down to the platform. And in those cases, they will build it, but then they'll give us a maintenance and capital replacement buyout.
Thank you. Olympia.
Thank you. I have many questions, but I want to start with a clarification. Can you tell us this smartly named zoning for accessibility proposal, how has it, what instigated it, and how has it been informed? Which are the agencies or private entities that have instigated and informed this proposal?
So the proposal was put forward by the MTA and then supported by the Department of City Planning. And that's the two joint agencies that are supporting this application.
And when I say how was it informed, did you had a process that you talked with expert communities, etc., in order to present what you presented to us today?
A lot of the background information on how exactly this was formed might best come from Chris Lee in our zoning division. So I might turn it over to Chris.
Hi, thank you for your question. And Minsan, maybe you can chime in. Yeah, so we worked very closely with the MTA. We also noticed that actually in certain geographies or certain areas in the city that there are easement provisions. And we wanted to just really expand that provision system-wide to support accessibility throughout the MTA system. We did do outreach with different groups. We did get feedback from them, and we have worked very closely with City Council as well as MOPD to really develop this citywide text amendment.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Yeah, this zoning for accessibility, I think we had in one of our earlier slides, the City Council put out a report a few years ago called Zoning for Transit Accessibility. And that report actually included specific recommendations, including, and this builds upon a lot of those recommendations. And we'd be happy to share a link to that report following this meeting as well. And as Chris said, one of our partners on this initiative is the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. They are a key partner on this. It just so happens that the MTA and City Planning were the co-applicants on the land use application, but MOPD is our partner as well. And the conversations also happen because there have been a number of missed opportunities especially when it came to the easements in various locations around the city, where we just didn't have that framework in place where we could get an easement because the easement right now exists mostly along a special transit land use district and 3 stations in Inwood. So we realized that because we missed a lot of opportunities to work with developers to get these easements, we ended up, or we will have to end up putting elevators in much less optimal locations that end up costing the MTA much more money, and also results in a path of travel to the elevators inside the station that is much more circuitous and less convenient for those who need an elevator. So
You need
that's
to elaborate on the easements, because my question is more about the expanded transit bonus proposal. And how did you calculate with the 20 or 25 or even more at your discretion, extra FAR and the 500 feet rule and information like that I feel you should, have a certain kind of engagement with different kind of stakeholders in order to come, or expertise, I guess, to come up with those. And that's where my question was aiming. I have many questions, but I think I should stop with this one and then come back later with the others that are more detailed.
Thank you, Olympia. Thank you so much. Dominic?
Hi. Okay, so I may not be totally understanding some of this. So we have with the Delancey Street and Essex Street. We tried to, when that was being built, we tried to have the developers work with the MTA to have an elevator put in at that point on the south side. So I'm curious, because you have that as a proposed bonus, an easement station, and I'm wondering how that would work since the development is already done. The developer is the same developer, on that whole southeast corner. And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, it doesn't seem like this, what I've seen so far, it doesn't seem like this would help in this situation. So like, it's nice that there's a dot on there, but I don't understand how it helps us in that station. So that's kind of the first part of my question. The second part, because there is an opportunity still on the north side for that same developer to benefit from this. And so I'm curious if there's any kind of loophole where they are able to post modification, give MTA access to any part of their site on the south side, and would they then be able to potentially try to bump up anything on the north side?
Are you talking about an already built? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the development that you're specifically referring to, but is it something that is already built?
I'm referring to one on the south side, it's already built, and then on the north side, it is not built.
Is it under construction, or do they already have a permit from the Department of Buildings?
It will be. I don't remember what the status is for in terms of permits, but the building that's there is going to be knocked down, and they're going to be building another building there.
You're talking about the northeast corner of Essex and Delancey?
Yes.
We're in conversations with them right now, because there is an escalator that and an entrance that goes to that building. You're talking about that part of the Essex market?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the existing development that you referred to, ZFA does not apply to any sort of existing developments, and so this proposal would have no effect on that unless they came back to expand or modify their particular site.
Okay, so that's really my question. Is there's a dot there, which anyone looking at this map would think, oh wow, okay, there's potential that we could actually get something there, but that doesn't seem to be the reality.
So in terms of the easement, it's really that, like, the green shading around those dots show any development that is within 50 feet of the station the station footprint. And so any of those sites would actually be eligible if they were to be redeveloped or expanded. They would have to come to the MTA and city planning to determine if an easement is required on that particular site. And so there are other opportunities for easements to be implemented in those.
Right. So it goes back to Trevor's point earlier, and I think maybe Lisa or someone else made the point, like it. So this is just it. Those buildings were literally just built within the last couple of years. So there's not going to be like it would be eons before there's another opportunity for them to do something there, unless they are given the benefits or bonus, for them to actually decide to, to put something in there. And it doesn't sound like this would, it sounds like the zoning would allow for it, but there isn't any other program plan to, to try to retrofit any of those sites where there's that green buffer.
And this assumes, I don't know the station plan, so I don't know how, those new buildings would have connected down to the station. But assuming it does, yeah, it looks like, that was a missed opportunity. And this is exactly why, with all the buildings going up, that was one of the impetus for zoning for accessibility, because there are developments going up, and we have seen a few missed opportunities in Manhattan, and then I know some in Brooklyn. And so we're, trying to make sure that we don't miss those opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I guess, and that's one of my biggest concerns is it's great to hear that you're speaking to them, but you all were speaking to them the first time around as well. And so I don't know exactly what the timing is for this zoning to get into place, but I'm really hoping that this is not going to be another missed opportunity at least on the north side, the northeast side.
I do also want to add that as part of our easement provisions, we have a required process that would apply to developments and enlargements. And we also have an optional set of easement provisions for sites that would like to go through some kind of conversion of uses. So it's not just new developments, it can be for conversions, but for those sites that are seeking a conversion, it would be an optional provision.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, that wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
And I'm sorry to pick up the northeast corner because that whole development was RFP'd, and with EDC as the lead agency, there was a requirement for that particular site to give us an easement. That's the basis of our conversation with them right now.
Oh, okay. But not on the south side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Linda, you had a hand before. Do you still need to ask the question, or you lower your hand already?
I lowered my hand because Trevor basically addressed the situation at East Broadway. I guess I would reinforce that I wish that we were not dependent upon oversized development in our neighborhood in order to get that awful station addressed.
Hi, this is Marcus Book. I just want to clarify for Mr. Hollins that the East Broadway station. So just so you understand, that work done at that station was completely and totally associated with the Rutgers Tube Tunnel Rehabilitation Project. It's a large tunnel project related to Superstorm Sandy, and the items of work being performed that were performed at East Broadway were in conjunction with the tunnel project and were limited to work that would take advantage of track availability and suspension of service associated with the tunnel project. So this was not a station project. This was a tunnel project, hence there was no trigger there.
Marcus, I appreciate that answer. So you're telling me there were no platform improvements, no ADA lines painted, no staircase improvements, only tunnel work, no tile improvements?
No. There was limited work to take advantage of track availability associated with access to the track, but it wasn't a station improvement project.
No, I know, because if it was a station improvement project, it would have triggered ADA accessibility. But I'm saying there was work in the station that was done that was not Sandy related. You took advantage of track availability to do some station improvements, but it wasn't deemed station improvements. It was Hurricane Sandy.
Correct.
Okay, so before we go to the second round, I have a question. The plan gives developers like up to 20% of the bonus FAR or 25% height increase in building. So I wonder, like, what factors determine the percentage of that bonus? Why is that 20% and not 10% or 5%? How do you determine those numbers?
I can answer that question.
Go ahead, Chris. That's fine.
Okay. Thanks for your question. I just want to clarify that there are a number of discretionary actions that are being proposed as part of zoning for accessibility. We have the easement, which is not a discretionary action. It will go through a joint certification between our chair and the MTA to determine whether an easement is necessary on the zoning lot or not. Then we have three discretionary actions. One is for the transit improvement bonus that will grant up to 20% of an FAR increase. Separate from that, we also have another discretionary action through an authorization that would grant zoning modifications except for floor area regulations, but will allow for up to 25% of a height increase. And then if a developer wants more than 25% of a height increase, it would be subject to a special permit process that would have to go through full ULURP. So 20% of floor area increase for the authorization for the transit improvement bonus is really a standard that we use. Again, not all, it's not guaranteed that a development would receive the full 20% of an FAR increase. It would be subject to specific findings from the commission. So it really depends on the amount of public benefit or benefit to the general public as well as transit riders that the improvements provide to determine how much of a bonus a site would get. These improvements will have to be significant. The commission will have to look to see whether it improves the accessibility of the station. They will have to determine whether the improvements enhance the capacity or the environment of the station. So these are all, things that the commission will have to make a determination on before authorizing this floor area increase. 25% of a height increase, we did a lot of analysis to see how much additional height is needed if you were to grant a 20% FAR bonus. 20%, 25%, they don't match exactly because we have height and setback requirements. We have lot coverage requirements that kind of shrinks the building's footprint as you go further up. So 25% is really how much a district would need. Development within our 9 or 10 district would need to retain its built-in flexibility to fit 20% of an FAR bonus. The authorization is really meant to allow developments to accommodate either an easement on a zoning lot. And in some cases, we may have very unique site conditions that may make it very difficult to accommodate an easement volume. So we want to provide an avenue for developers to make any modifications to zoning to the minimum extent necessary. All of these modifications would be, again, subject to City Planning Commission findings. If they want more than that, for whatever reason, these modifications will have to go through full ULURP and would be subject to a special permit process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I also have another question. Trevor mentioned a little bit earlier that he worries if this plan is going to encourage the building of accessibility in wealthy area or more wealthy area, but it would discourage, or well, not really discourage, but will probably left those poor neighborhood out of building new escalator or elevator. So how do you guys like address to his concern?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we appreciate that because we're tying a lot of this to the idea that development will be attractive around transit sites, transit stations. You know, we understand that could be a possibility, but I think that's why, coupled with the MTA's capital improvement budget, they're able to target sites that stations that aren't seeing these sorts of investments. And maybe the MTA can speak to how they determine where their capital dollars are going.
Do you want to address MTA people or you?
I wasn't sure if I should answer it or if Marcus should answer
Take
it.
the first shot, Mozart.
Oh, you want me to take the first shot? Fine. Well, certainly, if we have improvements made by developers under the expanded zoning bonus provision of zoning for accessibility, it allows us to make investments throughout our system under all of our future capital programs. It allows us to save our resources that we would have otherwise have to put into certain stations, and it allows us to invest in other parts of the system and get to system-wide accessibility much more faster than we otherwise could have.
And also, you know, under the 2024 capital plan, you know, the MTA chairman committed $51 billion to improve accessibility throughout the system. That included 70 subway stations. Of course, COVID came along and changed the playing field somewhat, but we're beginning to get our revenue sources and funding sources back online. And as that kicks in right now, I believe the commitment in 2021 is to make 8 additional subway stations ADA accessible. And we've submitted tons of press releases to try to keep everybody up to date with where we stand on that. Of those 8 that are committed for 2021, unfortunately, there's not one in Community Board 3. But of that total 70 stations, I believe that Essex Delancey is part of that. So I would just, we'll keep you posted on where we stand as the capital program begins to get fully ramped up again, where that stands. But I know right now for 2021, it's the 8 stations, not one in CB3.
Jackie, can I follow up on that point?
Yes, sure.
I'm just wondering, has this been studied? Like the idea that especially the bonus, the density bonus would benefit more expensive, likely higher income areas. Has there been a study on how, on the inequity there? I understand that capital funding could be used for other things, but has there been a study of that happening or the result of this? And if there hasn't, what is being done aside from saying, you know, there will be money then for other stations? Is there a specific or explicit commitment to addressing the needs of lower density, maybe lower income, or neighborhoods that serve primarily, you know, people of color, or, you know, less central commercial business districts like in dense Manhattan?
Yeah, so I know that in terms of the bonus, you know, where it was determined to be appropriate was, you know, where we expect development to already occur. So we don't expect this to induce development. We expect, like, this will happen in those areas where we are already planning, development will likely already occur. In order to get that bonus, a site would need to be in a high enough district. It would have to be a large enough site to really take advantage of that. Where exactly those are on a site-by-site basis, like we did not do a citywide, site analysis to determine where we project those sites to occur. That would be a very large undertaking, and that's not particularly something that we've done. But I do think that the point that Wunsun made is accurate, that like as we see more and more potential for private developers to be contributing to these things, that allows the MTA to be even more discerning with where they're investing their dollars through their capital program. And I know that doesn't quite directly provide the analysis that you're asking for, but that's not a part of this project to date.
I do also want to, I know your question was about the bonus, but the easement provision is a system-wide requirement. And we could really use that in places outside of Manhattan. In many neighborhoods outside of Manhattan, you have elevated lines, elevated stations. And a lot of those stations, the platforms can be very close to buildings. And so that we have found that leaves us very limited space to put the elevators on the sidewalk, or we have to come with some other complicated place to put elevators, and having the system-wide easement provision of zoning for accessibility will help us incredibly in neighborhoods outside of Manhattan, outside of central business districts, that can support the zoning bonus because of the underlying FAR, which can support that. So that easement requirement is really, really going to be helpful for us.
Thank you. Lisa needs to sign off soon, and I know she has more questions. So Lisa, you go first.
I really can't. I have to leave now.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Then if I remember correctly, it was Trevor. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Olympia, you go first.
I mean, it's okay. Trevor can go.
I'm going to be really quick. These easements only apply for subway stations themselves and not, for example, tunnel access points. I know that Rutgers Tube has an access point on South and Rutgers Slip, but this will only apply to subway stations, correct?
For stations. In some cases, it allows for us to have a conversation if we need a below grade space for substation. But the focus is on access points, station access points.
And the L train, that tunnel work, which did produce an elevator, is there an example where that was successful with the L train or the tunnel work that was done on the L train?
I'm not familiar with that project. Marcus, are you familiar with that project? That you can speak to it?
I'm not sure what the question is in terms of success. What do you
Were you able to get easements? Because I know they were doing a lot of work. The tracks were closed for a bit of while. Were you able to get any easements or elevators for that?
So that's the reason why we have zoning for accessibility, because easements don't currently apply in those areas. So that's why we want to create a system-wide easement framework, so that in those areas in the future, where there's a development happening, that they will have to go through that process, and in the future, the MTA will be able to provide an elevator.
Right, and in that scenario, there was an elevator built as a result of the L train tunnel work?
No, I think that the elevator was built as part of an ADA accessibility improvement project.
Okay.
Thank you. Olympia.
Yes, so my earlier question was a little bit of a Trojan horse or whatever, because I feel we are way too jaded in these meetings, and Trevor and Linda talked a bit about it, but I want to make sure that you as representatives of your agencies listen to that. For us, the proposal that you are presenting of expanding transit bonus in order to incentivize private developers to pay for a public amenity, for public infrastructure, it is unacceptable. And the fact that your agencies on your own thought that the only way we, the public, we, the wealthiest city in the world, can afford public transport is by giving away 20, 25, or at your discretion, even more of our precious air, especially during a pandemic in which we crave to see the sky in this neighborhood very often. So I want to make sure that you understand, we're going to work with you. We're reading all the details and we're going to give you feedback on a lot of things. But the premise number one that I hope will go back to your agencies is especially the proposal about expanded transit on bonus. To me, it is offensive. We are in a new era. Did you see the 220 billion that we passed at New York State? Like, we need to invest in our infrastructure, and especially about ADA. As a mother of 2 young children, that I was obliged, while I was holding one of the child out from the stroller, the other one was barely walking, they wouldn't let me go in if I wouldn't fold the stroller. And I had to beg strangers to hold my children. Thank God it was pre-COVID, because I needed to fold the stroller. With 2 children, I also was supposed to fold the stroller, right? So I understand the need, but I also feel that it is offensive and we should not be jaded the way we are perpetuating this scarcity mentality that hurts everybody as a society. And of course, always it is worse for the lower income folks.
Can
So I want to say that, like, I hear you. I do completely understand. I also have a 6-month-old son, and I can sympathize very much with accessibility issues. I do want to clarify that, like, we don't see this as giving away, 20% bonuses or things like that. The entire idea behind it is that the amount of floor area bonus would cover the cost of the required improvements, as well as the costs and risks associated with the application and review process. So it is that, private developers are providing a substantial improvement to the public realm, and in exchange are receiving something that is equivalent to that. And so
I understand that. Sorry, just to be sure that you understand me too.
I do.
Exactly what I understood. But what I'm telling you is we have the responsibility to do within the next year everything ADA accessible. And we need to find public funding. We may need to borrow as a city, but we, the public, need to finance that. We cannot depend on the whim of private developers randomly where they occur. That's not what we need.
Can I just chime in? I hear you completely. This is not intended to replace MTA's capital obligations or commitments. And this doesn't mean that future ADA commitments, that we'll stop making future ADA commitments. So I just wanted to make that very clear. This doesn't replace any of our capital commitments. Our current capital program is historic in their allocation, $5.2 billion. And we actually built we made 11 stations accessible in this past year alone, which, given the circumstances, I know it's not fast enough for the city, but we are making progress, and we won't stop making commitments from our capital program. However, developments will continue to happen, and if there is such a development that also wants to, in kind, make an improvement to a station, we just want to make sure that we have those opportunities. But it's a 2-component, proposal. We have that bonus, but we also have the system-wide easement, which I know I keep talking about, but it would be incredibly beneficial for us.
Thank you, Manson. Michael?
just to clarify, Jackie, that because I truly see different those two issues, I don't believe they need to be together.
Mhm. Thank you. Michael and then Herman.
Yeah, I echo what Olympia was saying. I think relying on private real estate to provide accessibility, and the fact that there haven't been studies on equity and access citywide. I realize it's a huge undertaking, but that's deeply concerning to me. It's a citywide text amendment. So I think there should be studies done that are citywide, especially related to equity or lack thereof in the system. But so I'll just ask one more question. The bonus, how does the bonus work with programs like inclusionary housing or other bonuses? We just had the, I forget the name of it, but the zoning for the flood resiliency proposal a few months ago.
ZCFR.
What was that?
The ZCFR is the one you're referring to.
Yes, thank you. You know, these new programs that are providing other bonuses, other floor area bonuses for private development. So how does this specifically work in with MIH? If both programs allow a developer, for instance, to build 20% more, are those two 20% calculations like compounded, or
Yeah,
what's the
so
calculation there?
that's a good question. So MIH actually isn't a bonus program, but voluntary inclusionary housing is a bonus program. And so this was designed so that we did not want transit accessibility to be pitted against affordable housing. And so if a developer opts to do the transit bonus, that is the only bonus that they can't compound that with other bonuses except for the voluntary inclusionary housing bonus. And that was specifically because we don't want the programs competing against each other. If a developer chooses to do voluntary inclusionary housing as well as the transit system improvement bonus, those would be the only two that are allowed to work in tandem.
Thank you. Next, Herman. Herman, you are muted.
Okay, a lot of things I won't repeat it in terms of what Olympia said and Mike and Lisa, except to say I'm going to be very specific in terms of where I live. And I'm at Houston and East Houston and 2nd Avenue. In 1971, I and other people had a conversation about the 2nd Avenue subway in 1971. So that's as long as I, for one, is expecting that the 2nd Avenue subway would have end up at the Manhattan Bridge, as they told me it would. I know at 14th Street on the southeast corner at New York Pioneer, there is a commitment at that corner for a station. The second station that I remember is somewhere between 3rd and 1st Street, connecting to where the 2nd Avenue is. Now, somebody said about missed opportunity. There has been, and they're talking about 14 2nd Avenue. 14 2nd Avenue is now being developed as a condo next to the park, which would be a great opportunity to connect the station where the F train comes in. So somebody mentioned that's supposed to do at least do a citywide stuff. Go to where all the subway station is, where they're located, where the existing stations are, and really looked at the opportunities instead of just giving us what 4 or 3 areas in this neighborhood. And Dominic also spoke about the Delancey Essex Street corner, and you said you were discussing that. So I think it should be more comprehensive, and I have a problem with the bonuses because it's like I have a problem with housing for every 80-20, as if 20% is sufficient in terms of giving affordable housing. As Olympia says, the city should make a commitment to these projects and not consider that these projects is going to solve all our ADA problems by having developers, giving developers bonuses to construct these projects.
Thank you, Herman.
Yeah, I can just address that really quickly to say, I think if you have ideas about ways that the applicability of easements could be expanded, we welcome those in whatever comments that you wish to issue to us as an agency. And I hear you echoing what many other people have said, that, and I don't know that anyone from DCP or the MTA would disagree that we would strongly advocate for additional funding for our capital programs as well.
Thank you, Anthony. Damaris, I saw you had a hand before. Do you still need to ask that question?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. So that would close the question.
Jackie had a few more questions.
We normally do 2 rounds, but Olympia, you go ahead.
Thanks. So first of all, I wanted to ask, when you combine the voluntary, because that the question that Mike made earlier, when you combine the voluntary and the transit, does that trigger ULURP? Because it's a bigger percent than the 20 that you said would trigger ULURP.
I'm going to let Matt answer that question, actually.
Yeah, I guess before it triggers ULURP, I mean, if this is an authorization, then that's going to go to the commission. If they're seeking any types of waivers or any type of special permits or things like that, then yes, that obviously is something that goes through ULURP. But I just want to talk a little bit about whether that can actually, like, what's the likelihood of that actually happening in 3? It's pretty low. I mean, the areas where voluntary inclusionary housing are mapped, I mean, we can look around Astor Place. Those 2 sites that are just to the right of the Astor Place blue dot, that's the Cooper Union. And then the new Astor Place development that's just across the street. So that's not a site that we would anticipate where that new development would be built.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, and I don't really see any other places where we would have a combination of voluntary inclusionary and the bonus. If we look south of Essex Street, that's Go Broom, which you all are very familiar with. That orange block down there, that's the Go Broom R91 district, which you recommended approval for recently. So and that's MIH mapped, so there's no stacking there. If we go up to 3rd Avenue, looking at East 14th Street, that only development, those are 2 condos on both sides of those streets. One of them has exhausted, I believe, almost all of the floor area because that was a zoning lot merger back in 2010. So the applicability of the bonus here, like we kind of said before, there wasn't a soft site development that we could have done citywide because the way that zoning lots change, that's not something that that is done as part of this study. But that's why we have the community board liaisons here to kind of talk through what the real life implications are going to be of these things.
But I think you're missing a very important real life implication for CB3, that is precedent. Now, we had already an experience most recently with 2 bridges where this minor mod that require just authorization, etc., are dealt in ways that we don't feel, are adequate. And so you are now talking of a scenario in which elsewhere, but fundamentally an authorization can, without any public process, go up to what, 40% or even more? Because if you combine the 2 bonuses, how much percent of extra FAR are we talking about, Matthew?
I mean, it's a percentage of a percentage, so it's around there. But that's what I'm saying is that
It's mongoose, so I do not want to.
what I'm saying, Olympia, is if you look at the areas where VIH is mapped, there's not a lot of overlap.
I know what you're saying, but that's not my question because.
And I'll also add that we don't map those anymore.
What do you mean we don't map anymore?
There's no more, we no longer map voluntary inclusionary housing.
Yeah. So, but my question was more because this is exactly one of the troubles that we have at land use committee and with the ULURP processes, et cetera, is that the more we create this precedent in which such a significant bonus is given, and somehow it only can go through an authorization where we don't know who's in the room and how informed are the people who are making this decision about the actual impact in the communities. I think this is very concerning. And I had the second question was about the easement agreement that I know Monsoon really strongly, advocates for. I mean, my concern, not a concern, but a confusion that I have about this amendment that you so much advocate for is, I would assume that like any other, metropolis, there is some sort of eminent domain, even though you may call it something else, that every time somebody is constructing something in proximity to, a huge public infrastructure like a subway, it's triggered, it's allowable, right? So that they would need, it wouldn't need you to be aware of every new development and go there and say, hey, I'm here, can we do an easement? It would require them to come to you and say, I'm gonna be building above a huge subway station. What are the requirements? What should I be doing? The same way me as an architect, I abide by my building code, and so this
That
is
but that is the process. Under this.
I'm sorry.
We don't contact them.
I'm sorry, Monson, before you reply, I just want to let everybody know we have to be, we need to have time in mind, and the questions, the answers need to be very precise because I need to move. So Monson.
Sorry, Olympia, what you're just suggesting, that is the process under the easement. We don't go to the developers. They're required every time they file for a building permit, they are actually required to come to us first. And then we will we'll look to see if we need an easement. We don't for the easement. They have to come to us. Exactly what you're suggesting.
But so how is this new thing that you're suggesting helping you, even though they are already mandated to come to you?
No, it's not that they already have to come. It's that the creation of zoning for accessibility would create the mechanism that requires them to come talk to us. As of right now, they don't have to. ZFA would make it a requirement that they come to MTA and city planning and say, I want a building permit. And we would tell them whether they need an easement or not on that site. So ZFA would create that.
So
Committee members, we need to wrap this up very soon because I need to open that up for the public.
Can we complete the content of this because it's very important? Can we have either Jim or follow up with DCP? Just because from my previous experience, that normally is the law. Maybe it's even in the building code. So the fact that right now, what they're saying is mind-blowing, that anyone can go and construct right now above a subway station, and there isn't this provision that we need to pass it now. It
looks like there's some confusion. Munson, you want to clarify?
If you're within 200 feet of an MTA station or track and you're developing, you're required to come to the MTA so that we can review your plans to make sure there's no impact on our station or the tunnel. And this will be, this is 50 feet, so will be part of that process.
Thank you, Munson. And I want to open up to the public because I want public to ask a few questions as well. I see one from Kenneth. He is asking, are there penalties associated with a building owner being negligent on maintenance? So it goes back to the topics we discussed before about property owners that don't provide the maintenance. what about penalties? Are there any penalties in those agreements?
As I mentioned, they're required to provide us with bank letters of credit that we can draw down on.
Thank you. And Jessica, you're from the public, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I'm also a CB3 member. I live in the neighborhood.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm associated with the Rise and Resist Elevator Action Group, and I'm also the chair of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility for the MTA. And I've been involved in many of the meetings to discuss this proposal. And my group, the Elevator Action Group, is in support of this proposal because currently the MTA needs to build about 900 more elevators to reach full accessibility. And I understand the concerns with private development paying for public amenities, but I feel like this is kind of a genie that has been let out of the bottle a long time ago. And I think this is a really worthwhile investment of private funds. Not only because the need is so great, and yes, you know, in an ideal world, the city and the state and the federal government would have already provided funding for accessibility, but I do know a lot about the ADA, and it's an unfunded mandate. So basically the cities and states it's kind of up to them to provide the funding and make it happen. And so an elevator is it's not like a staircase or some other static property. It needs maintenance, and this will become an ongoing expense for every single elevator that's installed. It has to be maintained, so it adds up. So that it's not an ADA group, it's an advisory committee to the MTA. It's a volunteer group made up of members of the disability community. We represent people with all types of disabilities, as well as older people and parents with young children. And so, yeah, that's really all I want to say is that the funding needs are huge. We're talking tens of billions of dollars to get to 100% accessibility. And then there's an ongoing cost of millions of dollars per year to maintain and replace those elevators when they eventually break down. So the need is huge because we have a really huge system, and ideally the funding would come through the federal government, the city and the state, but that obviously hasn't happened. So I think we just have to think about the long-term goals. And I know that it's really not really clear like how many elevators this will produce, but I think it's a good tool to enhance the MTA's commitments to making the system more accessible. And to speak to the equity issue, the planned next 70 stations were selected to expand geographic availability of accessible stations. So that would fill in many of the accessible transit deserts throughout the city. And it's not perfect, but in the short term, people would be much closer to accessible stations.
Thank you, Jessica.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our presentation today, the information session. And before I let our friends from MTA and DCP go, I think there was previously, if I remember correctly, Trevor had a request. And I don't recall what that request was because I was taking notes, but then I don't know if I have that.
Sure.
Trevor,
Well, I just want to be request, and I think this is part of our analysis of the CFA, is that what is the trigger for making a station ADA accessible? I think that's going to be critical in evaluating this. And I know that Munson had mentioned that she's in talks with the developers at the Delancey Street. If she could also give us information on her talks with the developers at the East Broadway station, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. I'm not the project manager, but I can see what information I can.
Sure, well, you can take it back to the MTA and get that information for us.
Thank you, Munson. And once I have those information, I'll distribute that to the committee. And thank you so much, Matthew, Anthony.
There is a question from Anthony.
I'm sorry?
There is a question from Anthony in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anthony, right.
Oh.
can you, Anthony, you're gonna ask yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I just wanted to get a clarification from Munson on what.
You muted yourself, Anthony.
Thank you, Trevor. Sorry about that. Yes, so I just wanted to get clarification on what you meant by bank credits as relation in terms of penalties for developer. Like, what is that? I just wanted a clarification on that.
Well, it's not for penalties. It's so that if we have to do self-help to maintain these elevators, that we can draw down on these bank letters of credit that the developers are required to provide to us when there's a certain period, I think, before the elevators are up and running.
Okay, so you guys will already have that
Yeah,
sort of line of credit, if you
it's
will.
it's a self-help financial mechanism. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Anthony, Chris, Munson, Marcus, Scott, on us tonight, and gave us some great presentation. And I think that the plan is very complicated because it has a lot. The concept is not really complicated, but it has a lot of details. And you guys clarify a lot of our questions, I think. And we're gonna. So our next step is that I'm gonna set up a deadline, and then the committee members will send me your comments about this plan. I see some committee members may support it, some committee members may oppose it. And I think next month, I think I'm gonna take a poll, draw a poll to see how people, to see a direction for our position. And then we will craft a resolution and a vote based on that. So thank you guys for, the DCP friends and MTA friends for joining us tonight. And you are good to go. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Board 3.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks. See you soon.
Okay. So that is done. That item is done. And the second item we have on the agenda is is about the committee goals for the year. So about the committee goals for the year, land use is a pretty busy committee. We constantly get a zoning review and text amendment and all that. So we don't need to create a long list compared to other committees. I think if we have like one or two things that as our goals for this year, that would be great. And one thing that is in my mind is that you heard from Chuck Schumer and also Board President Gail Brewer and a few other elected officers that a lot of money is coming from federal, and this money will cover a lot of areas such as housing, education, human resources, and in a few other areas. So I'm trying to see if maybe, and then the elected officers actually encourage us to give them comments on how do we see the priorities that this money should be spent. So maybe we can invite the elected officers or some speakers to give us a presentation how much money are they talking about on housing, and are there any like restrictions on the grants, on the funding, and then we can ask CBOs to give comments, and then we come up with a priority list for the agencies. I don't know if that is just like something in my mind, but you guys are free to contribute your ideas. But like one thing we need to know to understand is that we need to propose things that is within our own capacity. I don't want to like post something and then it's like take up so much effort and time that we are not able to invest. So that is something we need to be mindful. So anyone has opinions about that or comments?
I can't do the raise my hand thing. So can I just talk?
Yes.
Yeah, I can do it physically. So one thing that I've been thinking of is that it would be, and I don't know if this is necessary, I don't know if this costs money or how this would work, but when we go through ULURPs for new developments, I feel like sustainability issues are often kind of like last minute additions. And I would like to see something from our board and even broader than that, where, you know, any new development needs to meet certain green sustainability standards. You know, like I know there's less expensive ways, you know, being LEED certified is expensive and isn't always necessary. You know, you can do a lot of more passive and other types of greening. But I feel like we should have, you know, some sort of standard that we, you know, apply to all developments that are coming through the board.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I think when I became the committee chair a while 2 years ago, when I did a presentation at a full board, I think there was a member who asked for to encourage local hire, and I think that should be something standard to like certain like you review in the future. To like this language should be like standard that we always put in those comments. I think that like the sustainability, the local hire, this kind of thing. I think that's a good point. Any other opinion or comments? Lisa, I think you had some opinion about you have an opinion about NYCHA, I think. I cannot hear you.
You're on mute.
You are muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it seems to me that one of the biggest housing issues that's plaguing our neighborhood is the status of NYCHA and the huge deficit for capital improvements in NYCHA. And I think that there may be issues with regard to the new blueprint for NYCHA that's sort of a takeoff on RAD that maybe the neighborhood is not as familiar with, and maybe we should do something or ask the NYCHA subcommittee to do something with regard to information about the blueprint. Damaris, I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. It just seems like of anything in the neighborhood right now, NYCHA is kind of the overwhelming elephant in the room.
I mean, all of the developments, most of them know about it. There is a lot of work that's happening and people are on the ground. I'm not going to tell you that all the residents know.
Yeah.
You know, that's a whole nother ball game. But, you know, there is a big citywide movement right now of NYCHA developments and leadership that are opposing this. There was a press conference and a rally that happened a couple weeks ago. There was another press conference, I think, that happened over the weekend. You know, there are weekly calls that are happening, and you know that residents and resident leaders are welcome to join to understand what is going on. And in addition to that, there is a lot of discussion around the stimulus bill and the introduction by Elizabeth Warren from regarding Nydia's previous bill, and then it seems there is some building momentum around the Green New Deal bill. So there's a lot to be seen. So yes, this is a very important issue. Folks are not really in support of this for a variety of reasons, so you should know that. Yeah, we remain on the ground and others, and we're happy to help or, you know, bring you more information, make a presentation, or do whatever you all think is necessary, or come back and give you some language for, some sort of position that we, want to take on NYCHA, we're here.
I guess I'd be interested in your take of what more the community board should be doing on this, and whether it should be through this committee or first through the subcommittee, or
I think that one of the things that can happen is, because I'm not sure, I don't believe that the subcommittee, there was a presentation. Was there a presentation?
There was a presentation a couple months ago, but like we think that we also did a wrestle. We think that outreach is
I'm
not
kind of a little crazy. I'm sorry.
we think that the outreach was not sufficient because of all the technology gap and language gap happening right now. So we actually passed a resolution on that. We told NYCHA to slow down the process and try to reach out to the public, to the NYCHA residents. I think we had that. So if I think what we can suggest is that maybe like as a committee goes, or we can assign this to the subcommittee, that they try to, as a community board, that they come up with something to support like the outreach or something. Would that be something like you want to do?
Yeah. I mean, time is kind of the essence, but there's so much going on right now. There's a bill that needs to be passed at the state legislature. There is some permission that needs to be gained at the federal level. But, as with all things, these things, sometimes they take forever, and sometimes they just happen out of nowhere, and you're like, what happened, But let me think a little bit more about it, in terms of what concrete things we can do. I think the first thing could be is to do another presentation at some point to see where, but I'm not exactly sure, because NYCHA residents are not necessarily jumping at the opportunity to be on these calls, and
we are just gathering the ideas tonight. So if that is something that we all like, then maybe you can provide me a quick short language later, like there's a bullet that how to support NYCHA outreach or something like to the blueprint outreach, or support the residents to understand the blueprint better, something like that. Perfect.
Yeah, back to the original question of, there's a lot of funding coming our way, but and pardon me if I'm the only person who doesn't really understand where all this is going, but I'd like to hear something from either elected officials or community groups to say, this is what's coming, this particular neighborhood is affected and we should advocate for that, because I've heard that there's a lot of money coming, but I don't know what it's for, who's going to get it, and how to advocate for it. I don't know if they're going to look at our district needs. I don't know if they're going to look at income or anything, hundreds of millions of dollars. And if we're going to advocate for that, we need to figure out what it's going to be used for and where we can target areas. So I'd like to, and that's just not only for this particular committee, but for all committees, including mine, which is Parks, but I have no idea where it's supposed to go, who's supposed to get it, when is it coming? Some of it came already, like for the rain garden, there's 40 million that came from the DA's office that we didn't even know about it from the Parks Committee. And it's already been allocated for a particular thing. But that would be helpful for me.
I think you are absolutely correct. I think, to be honest, I mean, because I can only speak for the land use. I think each committee, because a lot of money is coming to New York, it would be really helpful if the elected officers or someone can give us a breakdown about like what programs, what money is available, what kind of restrictions, because usually those programs come with certain spending funding restrictions. So what restrictions are, so that we can better understand them. They need to dissect the numbers and give us analysis. And then we, like you said, we can invite advocates or CBOs to to like tell us, hey, this is what we want, this is not what we want, this is really the priority, this is not, and then we can create a list. And I believe other committees should be doing that as well. Maybe we can bring this to the exec about the need. And Damaris, you had a hand, and then Damaris, your hand is about, okay, Olympia.
I think Jim wanted maybe to answer to something you said before I go. Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, it was really short. I'm sorry. I'm keeping my video off because it was making everything lag for me before. But this question has come up from some of the other committee chairs as well. And this isn't a great answer, but we kind of investigated it on behalf of education because some questions were coming up in May's committee, Human Services, and some of the answers from various elected officials' offices and the agencies, and that was DOE in this case, weren't very clear. So, just to echo what's been said, there's not a lot of clear or coherent information about how we can at this point dictate where this money is going, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask. And that was one example, but the answer wasn't great. But it's just keep in mind, I think maybe yes, something for exec, because I know it came up in other committees as well.
Thank you, Jim. And Olympia.
Yeah. So I was going to say, definitely the borough president, budget director is someone who's very familiar with a lot of this. It is true, it is evolving, and the agencies actually, until June, they have time to negotiate, especially the money who's coming through the New York State budget. The agencies have time to decide on guidelines and allocation until June. So some money we won't know until June how it will be reaching the city so that we can advocate, because some of them will go to citywide programs and others may go to initiatives like what Trevor was saying, that they may be more like for a specific district or things like that. So my answer to your question about what we should be advocating for whatever money will be made available, we had discussed it earlier, and Steve from Cooper Square had also mentioned it. So there is this legislation that Carolina Rivera had introduced about, I can put the legislation to the chat, about giving the first right of acquisition, because there's going to be a lot of, like, people are going to bankrupt. There's going to be, like, we are heading toward a crisis. So what we want to avoid at our district is further exacerbation of gentrification and, more private development, consolidating more properties. So this legislation by Carolina was done, I think, specifically around housing and maybe the spirit of CLTs. But what I noticed, because I work a lot with commercial spaces in our district, is that there is a huge fear, because we have so much vacancy, that this will also exacerbate gentrification, because the leases, unfortunately, as we speak in our district, are increased, like small businesses, so they're increasing the rent ask. So the thing is, there's going to be an upcycling. And so the question is, how do we preserve some commercial space that is affordable so that they can have affordable services for our affordable housing? Because if we keep only housing, but people cannot buy anything anywhere, it's a lost cause. I think we should look into expanding this legislation by Carolina and including other kind of public funding that can be given to preserve affordable commercial space also in our district, because of how vacancies is playing out right now.
Thank you. And I think once we assure what kind of fundings are available and what kind of programs are available, I'm sure we're going to get into this discussion, and then you would have a lot of chance to advocate for that bill, and also the commercial rent relief bill. So next question I have is that I want to, so Naita, we can.
I'm sorry, can I just?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, Damaris, I forgot. I totally forgot. I forgot your hand. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Just really quickly, I want to say that I agree with most of what everyone is saying. I do think it is very critical, whether we know how the agencies intend to exactly spend down any of this money, to get a little bit of a head start and get a real sense of what agencies at the very least. There's always some language around funding. There's never money that's given like, here, go do whatever you want with it. I mean, we all know that. I mean, I wish, you know,
Right.
that's not the case. So I do agree, and I think we need to say hyper vigilant and get ahead of the curve now. At the very least, if we know we can, if there are things that are happening that other organizations or that projects are outstanding that we need to do something or notify folks, we can do that. That's one. Number two, this might be unrelated, but I know we're talking about like what can the committee, what can, you know, others do. Well, because of COVID, you know, all the rent relief, the rent issues that are happening in terms of, you know, people being behind. The moratorium is about to expire. And a group of us, organizations, applied to a grant to be able to help provide assistance with local residents for rent relief if they have been impacted by COVID. We don't know if we're going to get this yet, but it's like University Settlement, Chinatown Planning Council, Cooper Square, and Goals. But if we get it, we will be positioned to help people, you know, get some of their rent to, you know, their arrears. We don't know the parameters of the program. We don't know how long, what the application is gonna be like, what kind of paperwork will be required. But we do know that there is millions of dollars out there for this. Our community is going to need it, and they're expecting us to do like this enormous lift. So one thing I think that this community board could do once and if we get this, you know, if we get awarded this opportunity, or whomever gets it for our neighborhood, is to make sure that we have resources to notify as many residents as possible and get that word out, because we're going to need all the help that we can get.
And Damaris, that money, that funding has already been allocated, so it's happening now, and they're already processing that. So I think what I'm saying is that I think that is very important, but it is not about this funding yet, like this funding that is coming to New York. So two separate things. I understand what you're talking about, and I think you bring up a very important point. I think like every full board meeting at the elected officers session, I always ask them about this rent relief things, which is very important to local, and the money has been allocated already. So we are looking right now. I think our committee goals for the year is to know what other monies are available for housing, for tenants. That is something we try to find out, I guess. So I want to go back to the 3 points that we just listed. We want to talk about the federal funding. We want to talk about nature. Nature we can assign to nature subcommittee. And I want to go back to Dominic's point about standard language for sustainability and probably local hire as well. So how are we going to do that?
Sorry, Jackie, my point.
I'm sorry, yes, but let me finish this and then I'll go back to Michael, okay?
No, I said, why did you not add my point? Because I truly believe that we need to prioritize also preservation of affordable commercial space with whatever funding is made available.
Right, and that would be, no, what I'm saying, like, so what, no, I'm not ignoring your point. What I'm saying is that when we know what fundings are available, then we would have a list of priority, how this money should be spent, and your point will be incorporated in that list that we are going to create after we knowing what funding is available. Right now, we don't know what money is available. We don't know what federal monies programs are available out there. The elected officers from federal to borough president are telling us a lot of money is coming to New York. We need to tell them how to spend this money. And right now, we have no clue what monies are available, how much, what program, under what agency. We have no clue. So we are looking, just like you said before, maybe we should ask for borough president's budget director to give us those information. And then we would decide like what programs we want to see, how we want to prioritize the program for this money. And like you said, you can talk about your what was that? The first right of purchase, or also commercial rent relief. That is something we can discuss at that point. That's what I'm saying. I hope I explained that. So Dominic just disappeared. So if we want to create some standard language for sustainability and local hire, how are we going to do that? Anybody want to? Sorry. So I want to go. I mean, I see like the funding part. We can ask the district office to, and in fact, Jim is probably already doing that, to find out what kind of fundings is available. And the nature thing, we can assign that to make us a committee. But what about the standard language for sustainability and local hire? Who is going to create this language? Because we cannot ask I don't know if we can ask the office to.
I think we can steal the language for local hire out of some of our prior work. Essex Crossing, for example, had extensive language about that we can crib out of that. We don't have much in terms of sustainability, so that has to be crafted.
I guess I'm not clear on how we can establish a standard. I mean, because every, a multi-million-dollar new development would be different standard than a small rehab project, like.
Oh.
It could be adaptable, but it could.
Mm-hmm.
Linda, you want to mute? Linda, you're on mute.
Wait, you are already on mute.
Prevents me from butting in. No, I just wanted to converse with Lisa about that, because I think if we had in mind that when we do a resolution about a large development, we want to include standard language relating to local hires.
And also sustainability, I think is applicable. Like when we see, like you said, if it's out, like most of the projects that come through us are pretty big project. We don't have a very, very small project. So I mean, if we see very, very small project, then we feel like if financial wise it is not applicable, then we don't put it in. But I think it would be good to have certain language that talk about sustainability in case we need to use them. I think that's great.
Yeah, you may need to scale it down for a smaller project, but.
Dominic.
Yeah, so maybe this isn't the right place for it. Like maybe, I think what I'm imagining is that we need maybe we need, it's research, it's a consultant potentially that, that's familiar with sustainable development. So it's not necessarily money from the, projects where we need money from, from the agencies. So it may be something that's more, if we had like a fellow or, or something like that, where we had some other kind of funding. So maybe this isn't the appropriate place for it. I think, Lisa, to your point, I had thought about that also. Like, I think there's, maybe more affordable developments where they would need, need different types of standards. Cause like I was saying before, it's expensive. That's for the wealthy developers, right? Like, so I think there needs to be we need to like have some criteria for, for how it's applied, but I would like to see that we've thought about it and we have some, like a library to pick from.
Michael, I keep forgetting your hand. I'm sorry. Michael?
Yeah, I'm not, I guess I was just trying to understand the distinction you were making earlier about, because I agree with Damaris and Olympia about the need. I think it's a good goal if there's been things that are funded, but we don't know how it's going to be implemented, or if we have the ability to like influence the implementation and help advocate or help people get people relief. I think that should be a goal, but you were saying that the goal should be specific to like requests for funding that would come in the next year, or sorry, could you expand on that?
No, the reason, I guess Damaris, you can talk more about the rent relief fund. So the rent relief program has already approved by the state. So the money is already available because the federal government already allocate that money to the state, and the state also chip in its own money. So the money is already available. So we don't need to advocate for that anymore. The money is already available. What I'm proposing right now is that there are a lot of money coming to New York State that we don't know what those money are. We don't know if the money is for housing. We don't know how much money is for housing, how much money is for education, how much money is for human resources. We just don't know. So we want to find out how much money is for housing. And then when we have the idea, like what restrictions these fundings are, and then we can advocate for particular program. Like Olympia said, we can advocate if she wants to advocate for commercial rent relief, or because commercial rent relief has not passed the state yet. So that is something we can advocate for. The residential rent relief has already passed the state. We don't need to advocate for that anymore. The money is already allocated. We don't need to advocate. But commercial rent relief, it is something still like being debated. And also Olympia's talk about Kalina's first right of purchase. First right of purchase, it is in the council, still being discussed. We don't have any, there's no, in fact, when I was reading the newspaper, I don't see there's a very solid direction. I just don't know yet. But once we know how much funding from the federal is available, then like you said, we can advocate for the state to spend like certain amount of money on this. This is the priority. We want to support commercial rent relief. Then you can say that it's fine.
But
so that is what I meant.
Do you mean like with future projects, like with the infrastructure program, that Biden is rolling out, or because I understand the rent relief program, there is lots of federal money. It's mostly federal money that the state is using for that. So I just what money coming are you saying, like the potential for things that have been discussed that hasn't been like fully voted on? Or
that is correct, because I don't know if you recall from Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer had a presentation at the full board, Senator Schumer, and then both President Gail Brewer also had a presentation at the full board. They both said that a lot of money are coming to New York, but they couldn't, like themselves, couldn't identify what money they were talking about, like, and how much. And Jim and Trevor, they all try to find out what money, like Trevor was trying to find out how much money is going to be for parks. We just don't know. So we need to find out what fundings are available there. And because usually each funding comes with restriction, right? We need to know what kind.
Which program pass?
We don't know. They just
No. Which program was Trevor trying to find the funding for?
For parks. He was also trying to find out how much funding is available for parks. So we all don't know. We are all in the blue. So what I'm saying is that we need elected officers to help us to dissect these numbers, to give us an analysis, what numbers are available, what fundings are available, and what restriction they come with. And then we can suggest the government the priorities. That's what I'm saying.
Can you let Jim speak real quick, because he's in the office? I want to know what their take is on this.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. Jim. Jim just left, I think.
Maybe he's in the restroom or something.
No, sorry, I'm here. And let me try to do my video again. Maybe it'll work this time. To the extent that there are unknowns about where this funding is going and how it's being distributed. I mean, these can just be questions that the district office can. I don't know that the committee needs to assign members to work on this or something. I mean, give me the specific question and we can ask it to Chuck Schumer's office, Nydia Velasquez's office, HUD. I mean, we can just do that and get an answer. All I was warning about before was we did do this last month with May's committee and DOE, and we didn't get a clear answer. But we'll ask the question. I mean, Jackie, if you want to send an email with specifics, we'll facilitate that. And we can do that with, we can do that with lots of things. I mean, a lot of these seem like back and seems like with either agencies or elected officials, kind of like in anticipation of maybe wanting to do a resolution. So any fact finding that is needed, we can do. Can't guarantee the response, but we can definitely do it. The other piece I would just say is to maybe consider, in addition to these bigger goals, which are more about resolutions or advocacy, policy advocacy, to also consider some smaller achievable like internal goals. One that I'm thinking of is, we had this zoning for accessibility tonight. We know there are at least 3 other text amendments coming in quick succession like that. And I suspect that given that it's the end of the mayoral term and there's a lot of outgoing council members and a city council speaker, that you will see a large volume of actions come through in these last waning months of all these terms. So, an internal goal could be something like, we will always ensure 2 months of discussion on these, balance the agenda in a way that we always get 2 months of discussion and make sure we get out of the meeting by 8:30. You can give yourself like achievable, practical goals about internal time management, which will also, it'll help everyone stick to it. And also, I think at the end of the year, you can definitely check off the box that we did do this. Some of these bigger ones, I think, can guide your work, but just don't forget, you can give yourself more achievable internal goals, and that can be worthwhile as well. Some of the other committees did stuff like that, like just said, we're gonna do a couple of resolutions about, transit improvements or whatever. You can give yourself smaller internal goals. That was my only comment.
Thank you. Any other comment? Olympia.
Yes, thank you, Jim, for bringing this up, because this was something that I wanted to bring up, and I mentioned privately before to Jackie. And I actually have this huge concern of the quality of the work of this committee ever since I've been involved with CB3 has been going down. And I feel that this rush to finish the meetings, like today, you said Lisa had her hand up to ask a question, but you said, oh, we're going to do just 2 rounds of questions. But if we have more questions that are substantive about these things, that they're going to try to pass so many things right now, so many zoning amendments that they're going to have serious implications, because the devil is in the details. And you are not allowing us, as members serving on this committee, to ask all the questions that we have, so that we can provide you with the right kind of comments about a more meaningful resolution. That's why I take time away tonight from my family to be here, because I want to ask all those questions and do the best I can to serve my broader community with the smartest ass resolution we can come up within our capacity. And I feel hindered by this rush on asking less questions, finishing on time. We volunteered to be at CB3. We were not mandated here. If we feel that this is a commitment we cannot take, I don't think we should take it. The same thing goes about limiting public members, either limiting them as we did last year, in which in one ULURP we gave them 1 minute each to speak. I believe that CB3 should be welcoming all community members who want to be civically engaged and participate at these meetings. They should all be given their 2 or 3 minutes as they do at City Council. And we should do a better job to educate them. And if their comments are on the cuckoo land because they don't know what we're doing, we can provide them with links about, CB3 and tell them, okay, this committee is discussing this issue in that way. If you want to talk about this other way, you should attend that committee. But we should not be cutting people in time or making them feel unwelcome, because that's what we've been doing as a committee. And this has been commented upon by so many members of the public.
Thank you, Olympia. Before I address you, I want to let Herman. Herman has a hand.
What I want to do, as much as Olympia, as much, and the rest of the committee, as much as I want all the information I can to make a decision and have people ask as much questions as there must be a limit. And the chair has a prerogative to determine that. And it's not in all time that we try to overrule the chair to do that. I myself spend enough time before on committees that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. And I do not want to see that again. So if people want to come and be prepared to ask questions, compile those questions and ask them within the limited time. Some people, they rebut questions, they ask more questions, they elaborate on other questions. No, if people feel it's taking time and people want to have get information, then bring the information in a precise manner and ask those questions briefly as much as possible so that and give us the right information so we could process them. But I, for one, is not going to chastise the chair or any chair of any committee for making decisions that they have to. Okay? It may be a democracy, but chairs has a prerogative to hold the meeting in a concise manner in which we could get the information we need, and so we move along. And we are here until 9 o'clock now. How long do we expect this meeting is going to last?
Thank you, Herman. Maris, you have a hand.
So, you know, I see all points of view. I understand what you're saying, Olympia. You know that I absolutely adore you, and you bring up really valuable points that I think are important and necessary. At the same time, you know, while I want to know everything under the sun, I have a limitation too. You know, I hear you about where we are, but I think that, you know, saying things like if people can't give the time, they shouldn't participate. I think that in and of itself doesn't create accessibility. We have to think about that people have other commitments in their lives and that they're trying to juggle many things, and that because they cannot be on a call till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it shouldn't mean that we should say to them, well, then you don't deserve to be here. I don't agree with that. Though I understand what you're saying about when you make a commitment that you must take it seriously. So I'm believing that that's not exactly what you meant to say, right? That you're just saying we have to be committed, right? And I get that. Another point I do want to make, and I think in all fairness, and I rarely do this, but I have to say that it is 9:09 and there are 11 people on this call left. There's nobody else from the public. There are no other members. And I think that that's an indication people are zoomed out. Like I'm zoomed out. I've been on Zooms since 11 o'clock this morning. Really, I love you all to pieces, but really, I just want to hang up the phone. And I just want to go rest my eyes. And then finally, so this is not, I don't want this to be antagonistic towards anyone. I'm really trying to make light of it. But I do want to say that I think that Jackie's been doing a really good job of giving us all the space that we need, much more so than I have seen in other spaces. And I don't think that it is fair for us to categorize or point our finger at him when I feel honestly, in all honesty, nothing is perfect, but I do think that he does try to give us all some room to ask our questions, to ask them multiple times. And while that might not be the same at every committee, I don't think that is the case here. I think in this committee, I think we're working together in a different way, and I'm appreciating that. So I think that's just an important thing to say, because I know that he's working to be fair. And, you know, while it's important to give him feedback, I agree, it's also important to recognize the job that he's trying to do. So, you know, and then finally, my last point is that the system is inherently flawed. When we work in government, there's never enough time. They're asking us to make decisions about things that happened yesterday, things that happened 2 weeks ago, as we say in this world of organizing. We never have enough time. And I don't know how we resolve that, you know, in a way that's practical. But I do know that if I got to stay on this call any later than 9:30 on a regular basis, I might actually lose my mind. So I'm going to leave it there. And I love you all.
Thank you, Damaris. Before Olympia, I'm gonna let you speak again before I address certain things you said. Olympia.
Yes, I wanted to clarify. I mean, first of all, we do have 2 members of the public. Damaris, we're 13. There is Ariadna and Tunisia on the call. And I mean, one thing that I want to make sure, because I already talked with Jackie, mine was not an attack on Jackie personally. He and I have talked also about the quality of resolutions and how much are we as members, all of us, doing reading before coming and then submitting comments before the next meeting. And I have also suggested ideas about, you know, now in this era, you could be posting on the agenda a Google document so you don't infract, you know, the open law meeting, and you do put notes there taken from, you know, this meeting, and then you continue the conversation on a second meeting. My concern is when we start the conversation, we never reopen this conversation until something horrible happens, and then after a year or two, we have to deal with it, just because we wanted to finish today. The same thing that happened when I advocated a few months ago, hey guys, we cannot do a negative resolution without giving reasoning. And you all said, no, that's it, we'd close it. And then Jackie at the next meeting had to say, okay, we all decided we need to reopen this resolution and now give our reasoning. So to me, it is not me attacking anyone. It is me trying to say, of course, pandemic has been such a challenge for every one of us in so many ways. We lost our fathers. We have 2 kids doing remote learning and going through their terrible twos. We have cancer. I don't know what we have, but there are a lot of challenges in life. And I think that that should not be used as a way for us neither to, you know, disservice our greater community, nor to perpetuate toxicity. That's the other thing. Every time I attend a CB3, either committee or full board meeting, I can't sleep, because there is so much negativity, as if we hate each other. And I love you too, not just Damaris, everybody on this call, because you take serious civic service. We do this, we do this. And so that's the spirit in which I said what I said. And I feel there are ways that we can do this better together.
Thank you, Olympia. Trevor, and then Damaris.
I'm just not sure what we're talking about, and it is 9:14. I'm just not sure what we're talking about, and I think Jim left it off with being more efficient, and I think we just went in the opposite direction. I understand the need for everyone to speak, but you know, that's all I'm going to say. I just want to know what we're doing right this moment.
I'm just letting everyone vent, I guess. Thank you, Trevor and Damaris.
I mean, all I really want to say is, Olympia, I did not mean to imply that you were attacking him. But I did mean to say, you know, that I thought it would be fair to sort of assess what he's doing in a much more tempered and balanced way. But the real thing I want to say is, you know, all of these issues are real, right? Like, yes, sometimes there's negativity, those things are true. So maybe what we can do to start to try to address them is maybe we can figure out some other way, another discussion that can help us think about how we can make the most of our time, give enough room to people, you know, like be more prepared. I'm not exactly sure, because I feel you. And maybe the committees could start keeping a running list of topics that we talked about, so we can always go back. That's something that I do with my staff, for example. You know, I'm always like, can we just recap what we talked about, you know, or I go back months and I'm like, no, we said we were going to do this, or we never finished this conversation. So maybe that's a lot, but I'm just saying I'm willing to have a conversation and talk to folks to figure out better ways so that we can have more communication, more time for questions, and be more pleasant with each other, etc. And
Thank
that's
you,
it.
Damaris. Thank you, Dominic.
Sorry, I'm on the version that only lets you raise your hand once a meeting, I guess. So I have to physically do it. And first, love you all too. So getting back to the projects. So given what Jim said about kind of like the smaller goals, I would like to then put the sustainability item back on the list for, like maybe
Yes.
a couple resolutions around that related
Yes.
to different types of development. So
It
that's
is achievable. Yeah, it is achievable. I want to
Completely agree with Dominic.
thank you, Linda. I think I want to just give a general response to everything you guys just said. I think in terms of management, is always like my own management style or whatever. Like there's always room to improve. I mean, nobody. I mean, I feel like I look at other people. Nobody's perfect. I look at myself. I'm not perfect, and I can always do better for sure. I would need people to tell me how I can do better. And I feel like a lot of committee members I work with, they do give me suggestions, and I'm learning. And I always welcome your opinions and your comments. And I'll try to improve as much as I can. Regarding the 2 minutes, so I just want to talk a little bit about parliamentary. I think I don't know if you guys go to the parliamentary training provided by the board president's office. So this is actually what they suggest. So what they suggest is that each person should talk, try to talk within 2 minutes. This is actually what they suggest. And regarding the 2 rounds, so the 2 rounds is actually in the Roberts rule. They said there's actually a restriction. The 2 rounds is a requirement because like committee members, some committee members mentioned before. Yes, I mean, I don't plan to set a standard, like a set deadline for each meeting. However, after 3 hours, people burn out. We lose that focus. We lose the attention to certain things. And I don't know how productive we can be, especially when it comes to land use. A lot of things, it's a lot of details. Like today, I mean, the concept is very easy to understand, but those relief, you are talking about a lot of relief that has a lot of details that we need to spend a lot of time or a lot of focus on them. And if we let the meeting keep going on and on and on, I don't know how much can I absorb from those information. And I really thank everyone who stayed on until this hour. I feel like this is almost, I really feel bad about keeping you guys for almost like 3 hours, more than 3 hours, almost 3 hours. So if no other comments, I think for the goals for the committee goals for the year, I'm just going to put the funding issue, the federal funding issue, the nature outreach, and also standard language for sustainability and local hire. And in terms of internal management, I feel like maybe I could send out an email to you guys. You guys reply that what kind of comments about the management, or how can we work together, both me as a chair, Linda as a vice chair, and we need a secretary and committee members all can work together to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our committee. I think that may be something I can do. I can send you individual emails, or I can call you guys to talk to you. I mean, Olympia and I had a phone call, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, just to go through certain things she has in her mind. And I think that call took 2 hours, and we just finished half of it. So we may need another 2 hours to go over the rest of the concern you have. But I guess yeah, that is my general feedback. You guys have other? Olympia?
I just want a pee break during these meetings, that's all.
one of the ways we could expedite that is very often they take too much time for presentations where they say things that are not important. So they should streamline their presentations and say what it is really of substance, because I feel there is so much smoke going very often in these presentations, and you need to ask them 10 questions to get to the actual reality of what it is that they're suggesting. And that's why we end up asking 10 questions. And also to Herman's point is when you discover what they're actually going to do on question number 8, then of course you need to ask the question number 9, because now you finally understood what they were hiding all this time, because they do these presentations and they even answer sometimes with these like very long-winded things that they don't answer to your question actually. And so I think in terms of giving guidelines to them when they come to present to us, and then you as the chair saying, sorry, this is not what we're asking or whatever, it could be helpful. Because again, like the only reason, at least on my end, I don't know about for others, but very often when I have to ask again and again questions, is because I read all this material. I read it, all of it. I read sometimes 400 or 500 pages. And when they come and present, things emerge that were not really clearly stated in those documents. And so that's where I feel, you know, okay, it's worth my effort because at least I discovered where they're trying to do something that was iffy, you know.
Does anybody else have other comments? Maris and Trevor.
Maybe we can give the presenters, like Olympia said, I think that's what she just said. You know, I'm trying to type, but sometimes I can't do more than one thing at a time. I'm sorry.
I cannot.
So, but you know, let's give them some time limits to the presenters.
Maybe that's
long-winded answers sometimes, like Olympia said, that do not always get to the meat of what it is we need. I don't want to be rude because I don't want people coming here and thinking that we're a rude community board.
Right.
And they never want to come back. But I think we can put some limitations for them.
Trevor.
No, I had something, but never mind, and maybe a motion to adjourn, but that's it. I don't have
Please motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
All in favor, yes. We have to take a roll call. We have to take the roll. Yes.
Yeah,
Michael.
we have to take the roll.
Sorry, the formatting is weird. Jackie?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, yes. Dominic?
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan? Chu? Herman?
Yes.
Thank you. Trevor?
Yes, and good night.
Good night.
Hi, good night. Thank you, Trevor.
Lisa?
Yes.
Olympia?
Yes.
Damaris?
Yes.
Thank you. Troy? I think he's still absent. Steve? And Tim. They're not on, right?
Good night, all.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, Jackie?
I'm sorry?
Jackie, did you want me to send, I took notes, so I can send the notes this final time if that works.
Yes, please do.
Great.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.